Hello, my name is Alice Munyua. I am a nurse practitioner, and today we're going to talk about confusion disorder. Confusion disorder. The new name for this disorder is Functional Neurological Disorder. That is the new name. I have no idea why they decided to change, but that is the new name. This condition affects the nervous system. It affects our 5 senses, and it also affects movement. So the 5 senses that are affected is our hearing, our eyes, our tongue, which is tasting, touching, things you feel with your fingers, with your skin, and smelling. Those are the 5 senses. So this condition kind of affects it. The other thing that's affected is movement. That is position and balance. People who have this condition, some days they cannot walk. They wake up and they are unable to get out of bed, or they keep falling. When they are walking, they are going down the stairs, they keep falling. Sometimes they end up breaking bones, or they end up in a wheelchair. The other thing they have is difficult swallowing, chewing their food, difficult talking, like producing sound. And sometimes they also have unresponsive periods of time. They wake up or they don't wake up. Unresponsiveness is when you actually, you're sleeping in a deep state of sleep and nobody can arouse you. But you're still alive, you're just unresponsive. There is also seizure disorders that are noted with this condition. I don't know, they say seizure, so I don't know whether it's actually epilepsy, but most of the time it's seizure. What causes this problem? Well, the causes are kind of complicated. For most people, they have generalized weakness, they have paralysis for no apparent reason. When you go to the doctor and they do all the physical exam, sometimes they do MRI of the brain, sometimes they do CAT scans of the brain, PET scans, everything turns out normal. So it's a very confusing disease. And that's why before it used to be called confusion syndrome, because it will come and go. Like this week, you might not be able to go to work, you can't get out of bed, you can't walk. Come next week, you're able to do everything. And these people, the people who are affected, they are always at the doctor, complaining of this, complaining of that. They get worked up and nothing shows up. So the symptoms are coming from a source that is not apparent, but it's coming from somewhere. And normally it just affects the neurological symptoms, the neurological system. So what happens when somebody has this? Usually you find people going to their primary care doctor or their primary doctor or their primary medical provider, and the medical provider will do all the tests. They will do all the x-rays, blood work, physical exam, and when they don't come up with anything, they usually refer these people to a neurologist. So the neurologist may order an MRI, a PET scan, CT of the head, that will be a CAT scan of the head. And when nothing shows up, the neurologist will usually refer these people to a psychiatrist. And that's when they get this diagnosis, confusion disorder or functional neurological disorder. Because there is something that's causing it. The only thing is they can't see it. And most of the time, people are told that this disease is in their head. You'll hear people saying, oh, my mind is telling me that I'm sick, but I'm not actually sick. So let's look at this disorder and see what's really causing it. One thing I can tell you is that this disorder is a very expensive disorder. You will spend a lot of money at the doctors, and you also spend a lot of time away from work. Some people end up being on disability. So it's a very trying disease, a very expensive disease. Some of the risk factors. And when we talk about the risk factors are actually right on the money. They kind of did a good job when they did the risk factors. So some of the risk factors they see, people who have this condition, sometimes they have seizure disorders, like I told you. Sometimes you'll see epilepsy with this disorder. Sometimes you might see migraines. Sometimes you see movement disorder, almost like Parkinson's disorder, but they don't have Parkinson's. Then other times when they have like significant stress, you will see this condition coming up, or emotional trauma, or some kind of physical trauma, but it has to be significant physical trauma. So what really causes this condition? The other thing that they noticed is people who suffer this disorder also have anxiety disorder. Sometimes you might see dissociative disorder, and sometime in the future we'll talk about dissociative disorder, because we also see this problem when we look at people with schizophrenia and also personality disorder. Personality disorder is also noted with this confusion disorder or the functional neurological disorder. And personality disorder is also kind of common with people with schizophrenia, and we'll talk at another time. We'll just talk about dissociative disorder, what it is and what really causes it. We'll also talk about personality disorder and what really causes it. Because with those two, dissociative disorder, personality disorder, there is no medication for it. Now, some of the other risk factors that are noted with this problem is depressive disorder, or maybe a family member, like maybe a mother or a sister who has the same disorder. So one of the, in my opinion, when I look at this problem, I think about trauma, because people who suffer from this condition, they usually end up being treated by a psychiatrist, because there is no known cause for this disorder. Yet, the symptoms are there, and the symptoms are real. And so I look at this problem, and I'm like, something is causing it. And most of the time, in my opinion, I think trauma, past trauma. When people are traumatized, either in their childhood and they don't get to heal, they haven't had time to deal with it, or maybe they are keeping it a secret, the body usually keeps scores. So the body never forgets some types of trauma. And I was just looking at statistics the other day, and I told you that the body usually keeps scores. Unless you deal with it, the body has a way of dealing with a problem in another way. Trauma is a fact of life. I was looking at statistics the other day, and I realized that most people in this world are traumatized. They deal with trauma when they are young, when they are growing up, when they are grown up. There's trauma everywhere. So, but the only statistics I have is actually in America, because that's where I live, and I don't have any statistics from other countries, just America. 1 in 5 people have been sexually molested. Imagine that, 1 in 5 people. And we actually see this because people are beginning to talk about it. If you think about the Me Too movement, you will know that people have to deal with stuff, and people have dealt with stuff. 1 in 4 Americans have grown up with an alcoholic parent. And like I think I talked about that in another video, that when children deal with an alcoholic parent, sometimes they don't know how to behave. Because one time the parent is sweet and caring, the next time when the parent is drunk, they are mean, they are aggressive, they physically abuse the children, so the children have anxiety. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to behave. And the spirit of fear kind of creeps in. So I was also looking at statistics among couples, whether they are married or not. 1 in 3 couples have engaged in physical violence or physical abuse. And imagine some of these couples have children, so children are watching all this. And this is trauma. This affects people in a negative way. So if you don't deal with trauma, trauma has a way of showing up in a different way. And I do think with confusion disorder, there is something like this that's going on. So what should somebody do? Because there's no cure, There is no medication for this disorder. And normally when you go to see a psychiatrist, you end up being treated for anxiety disorder, depression. You end up being treated for other things. What should somebody do? Number one, you have to heal the trauma. Your heart has to heal. Your soul has to heal. So CBT, which is cognitive behavior therapy, usually helps. Breathing exercises, music therapy, talk therapy. To me, talk therapy is the best. All that trauma has to come out. You have to deal with it. And I know sometimes it's painful, but if you don't deal with it, your mind is not going to heal. And your soul is not going to heal. And it will show up in another way, like in confusion disorder or functional neurological disorder. So the other thing you could do is prayer and fasting. For me, prayer and fasting is like a gift from God because it helps you. It's actually good for your spiritual health. It's good for your mental health. And it's good for your physical health. And also deal with, because it's very difficult to deal with forgiveness, especially when you've been abused, when you've been sexually molested. It's very, very difficult to deal with that. And how do you forgive the people who molested you? It's very difficult. But if we have to heal, forgiveness, there's no other way to deal with it. You have to forgive. And I know that's very difficult to hear because some people think that if they forgive someone, it's as if they're letting somebody get away with what they did. But actually, in order to heal, forgiveness has to take place because there's no way you can go back and change what happened, but you still have to deal with it. But if you deal with it and you forgive, you're going to be better. It's better to heal than to live in this state of health. You know, when you can't walk, when you're using a wheelchair, when you're being taken care of, it's better to heal. And the body has the ability to heal itself. It really does. Thank you. I hope that helped.